Thank the witnesses for being here. Just to return for a minute to Paul Manafort and the issue of sharing sharing internal polling data. Consider the following from the Mueller report. Quote, because of questions about the polling data after it was sent to Kilimnik, the office could not assess what Kilimnik or others he may have given it to did with it. Close quote. Further, the report notes that, quote, Gates believed Manafort sent polling data to Deripaska, so that Deripaska would not move forward with his lawsuit against Manafort, close quote. Manafort also briefed Kilimnik on the Trump campaign and Manafort's plan to win, including campaign messaging and a discussion of battleground states, including Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Minnesota. What are the counterintelligence concerns about that the chairman of a presidential campaign would be providing that kind of information?
I think Paul Manafort is trying to sell himself, right? So, I mean, he clearly talks about his time on the campaign being good for his business. His plan was to go out and monetize his expertise after the campaign.
And excuse me.
No, I'm just saying, I think he is providing polling data. He is talking to Kilimnik. He is doing everything he can to put his name out there with oligarchs, which are very much part of the intelligence apparatus for the Russian government.
This is the senior person on the Trump campaign at the time. Yes. And I'm intrigued by your point about tasking. And I'd just like you to return to that for a minute, because isn't that really the magic moment? Isn't the magic moment when you've done all this work and you've been cultivating people like this and you tiptoe up to them and you use all these unoffensive contacts to get near them, and then you give them something to do that's wrong,
right,
that's inappropriate, and they know it's wrong, and they do it. Isn't that when you got them?
Yes, of course, and it just continues to increase. And, you know, that's why I said, I mean, the Trump administration is so lucky to have Paul Manafort out of there, because Manafort was not going to stop at polling data.
Because it's a test, right?
It's
if he'll
test.
do that, he'll do the next thing. And the deeper they get in, the more they got to keep going, right?
Yeah.
And so it's fair to say, had he stayed on as chairman, they would have kept tasking him, right?
I would definitely assume that.
And that's how you get in deeper and deeper and deeper. Isn't that fair to say?
Yes.
And it wouldn't just be him, right? It would be others that they're attempting and endeavoring to do this with.
Well, I mean, it was very apparent that the Russians were in communication with a number of Trump associates and trying to establish these relationships. You know, who knows how far they would have gotten with certain people, but Manafort made himself available. He thought it was good for himself financially. He thought it could get him out of hock financially with some of the debts that were already owed as far as this lawsuit. And, you know, he continued to really advertise his availability to them.
Fair to say that's a counterintelligence nightmare, Mr. Anderson?
Well, it's not. It might not be a nightmare, but it's definitely something to be extremely concerned about, because, as was just discussed, that tasking will continue to whoever until you say no, and that's when the extortion starts. Right, and so that's when we talked about this several times in this committee. It's Bob's your best friend, right up to the point that you don't give me what I'm asking for.
Right, Mr. McCarthy, I'm very struck by your answer to Mr. Quigley's question, that you would hope that someone in the position of the Trump campaign officials would come to the FBI. You said you want them to come to the FBI, right? And in fact, one of the reasons that you said you wanted that was because you like the information. FBI always wants more information, I understand that. But isn't it also the case that the reason that person comes to the FBI is to inoculate themselves against the very charge that they're playing footsie with a foreign intelligence service? Isn't that right?
Yeah.
And in fact, sir, if they did that, you would need a counterintelligence investigation, because you'd be working in partnership with the Americans in concert with their own government against that foreign interference. Isn't that fair?
Well, yes, although on the government side of it, you also have to be very careful that they're not playing both sides. You can get played that way, too, and that happens more often probably.
Played by whom?
By the person who comes in to report to you.
Fair enough, but in this case it was true. In this case it was part of a systemic effort we now know.
What you're saying is,
Mr. McCarthy, had they just told the FBI, as you yourself said you wish they had,
right,
there wouldn't have been a counterintelligence investigation at that point, right?
Well, but what you're saying is true. I'm having trouble following, because I've read the report. I don't think we're skipping a step here. I don't think that there's evidence that Kilimnik is a Russian asset. There's a lot of reason to be concerned about it. There's a lot of also information that Kilimnik was an asset for the State Department. The connection
Yeah,
that
but
Kilimnik had
forget
to
about
Russian
Kilimnik. What about the
intelligence
Trump- what
goes
about the
back
Trump-
20 years ago.
Forget about Kilimnik. What about the Trump Tower meeting?
You guys are saying he was tasked. How do we know he was tasked? There's no evidence that he was tasked.
I'm not asking you about Kilimnik. Excuse me, my time's expired. But with the chairman's indulgence, the Trump Tower meeting, or any of the improper contexts that we now know were part of this effort by the Russian intelligence services. My point is, sir, if the Trump campaign had simply picked up the phone and called the FBI and said, "We're worried about this," it would have gone a long way to inoculating them against the concern that they were working in concert with a foreign intelligence operation.
I couldn't agree more with
Thank you very
that, and
much.
I think anybody who thinks that they've been approached by a Russian asset should notify the FBI.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Hurd.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to yield as much time as he may consume.